All right, so we've got this pretty hefty stack of research all about optimal diets.
Yeah, it looks like quite the deep dive.
It really is, and I have to say, I'm pretty excited about it. It feels like everyone's always searching for that magic bullet diet, the one that's going to solve all their problems.
Oh, I know, right? The internet is just flooded with those like crazy fad diets that promise you the world, but
Yeah, exactly. But I think what's cool about what we're going to do today is like really get past all that hype and like really look at what the research says about diets that are actually optimal for, long-term health and well-being.
yeah, absolutely. And this expert analysis we've got here from Document Sense title, it really does a great job of cutting through the noise.
It does.
Yeah.
So where do we even like begin with all of this?
Well, I think the first thing we got to do is just acknowledge this like really important point that our expert makes right off the bat. There's no single perfect diet that works for everyone.
Okay, that makes sense. Like we're all so different, right?
Exactly. We've got genetic variations, different cultural influences on our food preferences, even evolutionary adaptations that play a role in like how our bodies respond to different foods.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So if it's also individualized, like where do we even start? Are there any common threads?
That's where these 6 pillars of an optimal diet come in. They're like criteria to evaluate any diet plan. So think of it as like going beyond just weight loss.
Okay, yeah, a framework. I like it. Give me those pillars.
All right, so pillar number 1 is reducing the risk of chronic diseases. We're talking about things like cancer, heart disease, metabolic disorders.
Right, prevention is key.
Exactly. Then pillar number 2 is improving your functional capacity and preserving muscle mass.
Okay, so it's not just about like how you look, but how well your body actually functions.
Yeah, it's about strength and, how you feel.
Love it. Function over form for sure.
Absolutely. And of course, we can't forget about essential nutrients. So pillar number 3. An optimal diet needs to provide all those vitamins and minerals that your body needs.
Right, so we're talking about a truly nourishing diet, not just one that's, restrictive or focused on like cutting calories.
Exactly. And speaking of, pillar number 4 looks at body composition. So it's not just about the number on the scale, but what your body is actually made up of, like your body fat percentage and muscle mass.
Right, because you can be at a healthy weight, but still have like an unhealthy body composition.
Yeah, exactly. Now, remember how you mentioned you sometimes struggle with those restrictive diets?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Well, pillar number 5 addresses that directly. It says a good diet needs to be easy to follow, enjoyable, and it shouldn't leave you feeling like constantly hungry.
Okay, that's where I struggle. So many diets feel like this, like constant battle of willpower. Is it even possible to find something that's like sustainable? Something you can actually enjoy long term?
Our expert really stresses that sustainability is crucial. A diet only works if you can stick with it.
Right, it's got to fit into your lifestyle, right?
Exactly. And then the final pillar, number 6, is all about affordability and sustainability from like an environmental perspective.
Okay, yeah, that's important too, making sure our diets are
Yeah.
like accessible to everyone and not, harming the planet.
Exactly. So those are the 6 pillars. They kind of give us this like framework for evaluating any diet plan. So are you ready to dive into some specifics?
You bet. What's first?
Okay, so this one might sound a bit counterintuitive. An optimal diet isn't overly palatable. Now, before you think we're advocating for, like, bland, boring food, hear me out.
Okay, I'm all ears.
It's really about recognizing and respecting your body's natural satiety cues.
Okay.
You see, when a food isn't overly stimulating, it's easier to stop eating when you're full because you're not constantly, like, craving more and more.
So it's about avoiding those foods that kind of hijack our brain's reward system and make
Yeah.
us want to keep eating even when we're not actually hungry.
Precisely. Think about those highly processed foods that are, engineered to be super hyper palatable. They trigger those addictive cravings. Oh, yeah.
An optimal diet focuses on foods that are nourishing and satisfying, but they don't lead to those like extreme cravings.
Okay, that makes sense.
What's next? All right, this next one is all about the social side of eating. Our expert calls this commensalism. It refers to the joy of, shared meals, connecting with your community, and participating in like cultural traditions around food. Remember those big Sunday dinners you mentioned?
Right, yeah.
That's commensalism in action.
I love that. It's like those meals are nourishing our souls as much as our bodies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Those shared experiences can be so powerful, I think.
Right. Okay, so we've talked about palatability, the social aspect of eating. Now, what about the actual nutritional content of an optimal diet?
Yeah, let's get into the nitty-gritty.
All right, well, first up, Fiber. You actually asked about this in your initial questions, and it's a big one. Aiming for at least 30 grams of fiber daily is a key part of an optimal diet.
Wow, 30 grams. That's a lot. It is, but it's linked to, lower risk of chronic diseases like heart disease, type 2 diabetes, certain cancers. Plus, it keeps you feeling full and satisfied, helps regulate digestion,
Right.
even contributes to a healthy gut microbiome.
Okay, so lots of fruits and veggies and whole grains, legumes.
You got it. Now, remember how we talked about connecting with your culture through food?
Yeah,
Well, our expert says incorporating those local, cultural, traditional foods, that's another element of an optimal diet.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's about respecting, like, our culinary heritage. And often that means eating more seasonally and locally.
Yeah, which is great for the environment, too.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
all connected. Now, this next one, this is something I personally struggle with a lot. It's that constant marketing influence. It's everywhere we turn.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming for sure.
It is. So what does our expert say about, like, navigating all of that?
Well, they actually highlight minimal marketing influence as a positive aspect of optimal diets. When you're choosing traditional whole foods, you're just less susceptible to all those tactics.
It's true. It's like when you're focused on real food, you're not as easily swayed by, all those fancy packages and slogans.
Exactly. And speaking of sustainability, that plays a huge role in optimal diets, too. It means prioritizing local and seasonal foods.
Right. Supporting local farmers, reducing our carbon footprint, all of that.
Yeah, it's a win-win. Okay, ready for the next element? It's about finding that sweet spot with caloric density and nutrient density.
Okay, break that down for me.
So an optimal diet focuses on foods that are low in caloric density, meaning they have fewer calories per gram.
Okay.
And at the same time, they're high in nutrient density, meaning they're just packed with vitamins and minerals and all those good things.
So it's about getting, like, the most nutritional bang for your buck, so to speak.
Exactly. Think leafy greens, fruits, vegetables, things like that. They fill you up without overloading you with calories.
And on the flip side, processed foods tend to be the opposite, right?
Yeah, high in caloric density, but low in nutrients.
Okay, so making those smart choices.
Yeah.
Now, I'm always curious about protein. Where does that fit into all of this?
Great question. Our expert actually highlights protecting muscle mass as another key element. So adequate protein intake, along with regular physical activity, are crucial.
Okay, that makes sense. I know a lot of our listeners are really interested in fitness and, maintaining muscle mass as they age.
Yeah, it's super important for long-term health. And it's not just about how much protein you eat, but also, the timing and the quality.
Okay, so it's a multifaceted approach.
It really is. What's next on our list?
Oh, this one might surprise you. Prioritizing MUFAs, or monounsaturated fats, as your primary source of fat.
MUFAs. Fill me in.
Think olive oil, avocados, nuts, seeds. These healthy fats have been shown to be really good for heart health.
Okay.
They can help reduce bad cholesterol, and they even have anti-inflammatory effects.
Oh, cool. I'm all about those avocados, so that's good news for me. Right. Now, another thing to focus on. Foods rich in bioactive compounds. These are things like polyphenols, carotenoids, and phytosterols.
Okay, those sound pretty intense.
They are, but they're really powerful plant compounds found in fruits, vegetables, legumes, all sorts of good stuff. They have potent antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties.
So the more colorful our plates are, the better.
Exactly.
Oh.
Now, this next one is, I think it kind of goes against a lot of what we see in today's food landscape. An optimal diet has a low degree of processing.
So back to basics.
Precisely. It's all about whole, minimally processed foods that haven't been stripped of their natural nutrients.
Okay, that makes sense.
And this kind of ties into the next point, which is that optimal diets are either what we call isoenergetic, meaning they balance your calorie intake and expenditure,
Okay.
or they might include slight caloric restriction. But the key is it's not about these like drastic cuts in calories.
Right. It's about finding that balance where you're nourishing your body but not overdoing it.
Exactly. And along those same lines, an optimal diet is also low in simple sugars and refined carbohydrates.
Yeah.
And they either exclude alcohol or keep it to, a bare minimum.
Makes sense. So we're talking about cutting back on the processed stuff, the sugary drinks, and, being mindful of alcohol intake.
Yeah, it's about making those conscious choices. And speaking of conscious choices, here's the final element that rounds out these optimal diet characteristics. An optimal diet is part of a holistic lifestyle.
Okay, the big picture. It's not just about the food, but everything else we do to support our well-being.
Precisely. And that leads us perfectly into our next discussion, where we'll delve deeper into this holistic approach and explore how our lifestyle choices impact our overall health. Remember that quote you highlighted about your grandparents and their traditional eating habits?
Oh, yeah. That quote really stuck with me. It's amazing how your grandfather just instinctively gravitated toward those traditional foods and kind of resisted all the like modern processed
Just a
options.
month. Yeah, I thought that was so interesting. It's like he had this like innate wisdom about what his body needed.
It really is. It's like he wasn't swayed by, all the latest trends or, marketing ploys. He just knew what felt good and what nourished him.
Exactly. And I think there's so much we can learn from that, especially in today's world where we're just bombarded with so much information about what to eat and what not to eat.
Right. It's easy to get caught up in all the noise and lose sight of like what truly feels good for us. So maybe tuning into that inner wisdom, like your grandfather did, can help us cut through all the confusion and find what works best for us.
Absolutely. And that disconnect extends beyond just our diets. It affects our sleep, our stress levels, our relationships. It's all connected. You mentioned in your notes that you were looking for ways to improve your sleep.
I was. It's something I've been struggling with lately.
Yeah, and this holistic approach suggests that what you eat can actually have a real impact on your sleep quality. So it's not just about getting enough hours, but also about creating the right conditions for restful sleep.
Right. It's the web.
So
Everything is connected. So how do we like start bridging that gap? How do we reclaim that like intuitive wisdom about what truly nourishes us, both physically and mentally?
Well, I think it starts with awareness,
Mm.
paying attention to how different foods make us feel, tuning into our body signals,
Yeah.
recognizing the impact that stress, sleep deprivation, lack of connection, all of that has on our overall well-being.
I've noticed that like when I eat a lot of processed foods, I just feel, I don't know, sluggish. My mood
Yeah.
dips. But when I'm eating like whole unprocessed foods, I just feel like lighter.
That's a perfect example of that awareness. It's about like becoming a detective of your own health,
I love that.
noticing those subtle clues and patterns.
So it's not about following like a rigid set of rules, but more about cultivating that mindful awareness and making choices that just feel aligned with our individual needs.
Exactly. It's a journey of self-discovery, and it's unique for each person. But these 16 elements we've talked about, they provide a great framework
Okay.
for creating a dietary pattern that's not only nutritious, but also enjoyable, sustainable, and culturally relevant.
And by like incorporating those elements into a holistic lifestyle, one that prioritizes, sleep, stress management, those meaningful connections, regular movement, we can really optimize our health and well-being.
It's like creating this beautiful symphony of healthy habits. One thing that really strikes me about this whole approach is that it doesn't feel restrictive at all.
No, it doesn't.
That actually feels quite liberating.
Yes, it does.
It's about abundance and joy. It's about choosing foods that nourish us and engage in activities that bring us joy and cultivating those relationships that feed our souls.
Okay, so before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, let's recap those key takeaways for our listeners.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, remember, there is no one-size-fits-all perfect diet.
Yeah.
But there are these shared principles that can guide us, those 6 pillars and 16 elements we've talked about.
And it's not just about what's on your plate. It's about embracing that holistic lifestyle that nourishes your mind, your body, and spirit.
Yeah, pay attention to your body signals, connect with your food culture, minimize those processed foods, prioritize sleep and stress management, and move your body in ways that bring you joy.
It's about making choices that align with your values and support your overall well-being. Now, I know you love to end these deep dives with a thought-provoking question. So what have you got for our listeners today?
Okay, here's one to ponder. If we truly embrace this holistic approach to health, what areas of your life might need a little more attention or nurturing? Perhaps it's your sleep or your stress levels or the quality of your relationships. It's really about taking an honest look at your life and identifying those areas where you could make some positive
I
shifts.
love that.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that our health is a continuous journey. It's not a destination.
Right.
And every day we have this opportunity to make choices that truly support our well-being. What's amazing to me is how all of this it all connects back to the simple wisdom of our ancestors, like your grandfather,
Yeah.
who just instinctively knew which foods nourished him best.
Yeah, he really did. And, I think that's a really powerful message for all of us to tap into that inner wisdom and trust our bodies.
Absolutely. There's so much we can learn from those who came before us. And by blending that ancestral wisdom with modern scientific understanding, we can create a truly optimal approach to eating.
Well, on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up this part of our conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure, and a special thank you to you, our listener, for sharing your research and inspiring this really insightful conversation.
Yeah, thank you for being here. We are so excited to continue exploring with you, and we'll be back soon with more.
Absolutely. Until then, keep exploring, keep experimenting, and most importantly, keep listening to your body.
Yeah, it's the wisest guide you have.
Until next time, happy eating.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here,
Yeah.
but there's still so much more to explore. And in our next segment, we're going to dive into some specific examples of foods and dietary patterns that align with those optimal diet principles.
Yeah, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of, what to eat and how to make it all work in your everyday life.
Exactly. So stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive into optimal diets. We'll be right back after a short break.
See you soon. All right, so we've talked about the principles. Now let's get into some specific examples. What are some of those foods that really fit into this optimal eating framework?
Yeah, give us the goods. I know our listeners are eager to hear like what they should be putting on their plates.
Okay, well, first things first, veggies. Lots and lots of veggies. We're talking about all kinds of veggies, from leafy greens to colorful root vegetables, cruciferous veggies.
Right, like the more variety, the better.
Absolutely. Different veggies provide different nutrients, so it's really important to mix it up. Now, you mentioned in your research that you're not a huge fan of broccoli.
I'm trying, but it's just, I don't know, it's not my favorite.
Yeah, and that's okay. You don't have to force yourself to eat things you don't like. But there are so many other cruciferous veggies out there that might appeal to you more. Like, have you tried Brussels sprouts?
I have, and I do like those.
Yeah, roasted Brussels sprouts with a little bit of olive oil and salt. They're so good.
They're
Okay, so veggies, check. Next up, fruits. Again, variety is key. Berries are fantastic. They're, low in sugar and packed with antioxidants.
I do love berries.
Yeah, and they're so versatile. You can add them to smoothies, yogurt, or just enjoy them on their own. Stone fruits are another good option. Things like peaches, plums, nectarines. Citrus fruit like oranges and grapefruits, they're great for vitamin C.
Okay, so I've got veggies, we've got fruits. What about protein?
All right, so protein is crucial for, building and repairing tissues, keeping us feeling full and energized. And there are so many great sources of protein that align with those optimal diet principles. We talked about MUFAs earlier, so things like nuts and seeds, those are excellent sources of protein and healthy fats. You've got almonds, walnuts, pumpkin seeds, chia seeds, flax seeds.
Right, and those are easy to like incorporate into snacks or meals. Right?
Exactly. You can sprinkle them on salads, add them to yogurt, or even just have a handful as a snack. Now, you also mentioned that you're trying to reduce your meat consumption,
I am. I'm not like a vegetarian or anything, but I'm definitely trying to eat less meat.
and that's great. There are so many delicious plant-based protein sources that you can incorporate into your diet.
Uh-huh.
Lentils, for example, they're a fantastic source of protein and fiber.
I do like lentils.
Yeah, and they're so versatile. You can use them in soups, stews, salads. Beans are another great option. You've got black beans, kidney beans, chickpeas.
Right, so many options.
So many options. And then, of course, you've got tofu and tempeh, which are made from soybeans. They're complete proteins, meaning they contain all the essential amino acids that your body needs.
Okay, so there's really like no excuse not to get enough protein,
Yeah,
even if you're not eating a lot of meat.
exactly. There are so many delicious and nutritious options out there. And speaking of delicious, let's talk about whole grains.
Oh yeah, I love a good bowl of oatmeal in the morning.
Me too. Oatmeal is a fantastic source of fiber and protein, and it's so easy to, dress it up with different toppings.
Yeah.
You can add berries, nuts, seeds.
Like a little bit of honey.
Yeah, it's a great way to start your day. Other whole grains to consider are things like quinoa, brown rice, wild rice. They're all packed with nutrients and fiber.
Okay, so lots of good options for carbs. Now I know this is a controversial topic, but what about fats?
Yeah, fats have definitely gotten a bad rap over the years, but not all fats are created equal. And healthy fats are actually an essential part of a balanced diet.
Right, they help us absorb certain vitamins and they're good for our skin and hair.
Exactly. And we talked about MUFAs earlier, so things like olive oil, avocados, those are great sources of healthy fats.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of avocado toast.
Me too. It's a classic for a reason, and you can get creative with it, adding different toppings like eggs, tomatoes, or even smoked salmon.
That sounds delicious.
It is. Other healthy fats to consider are things like nuts and seeds. We talked about those earlier. And fatty fish like salmon, tuna, mackerel. Those are rich in omega-3 fatty acids, which are really important for brain health and heart health.
So it's about choosing the right kinds of fats and, incorporating them into our diets in a balanced way.
Exactly. And remember, it's always a good idea to talk to your doctor or a registered dietitian to get personalized recommendations for your specific needs.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've talked about veggies, fruits, proteins, whole grains, healthy fats. Is there anything else we should be thinking about when it comes to putting together an optimal diet?
Well, one thing that our expert stresses is the importance of eating mindfully.
Okay, what does that mean?
It's about slowing down, paying attention to the flavors and textures of your food, really savoring each bite,
Right.
and tuning into your body's signals of hunger and fullness.
So not just mindlessly scarfing down our food in
Right.
front of the TV.
Exactly. It's about creating a more mindful and intentional relationship with food.
I like that.
And it can really help you, enjoy your meals more and avoid overeating.
This has been so helpful. I feel like I have a much better understanding of what an optimal diet actually looks like. But there's always that question of how do we actually make it work in our busy lives?
Right. That's $1 million question.
It is. So in our next segment, we're going to tackle that head on. We're going to talk about practical tips and strategies for, actually implementing these optimal diet principles into our daily routines.
We'll talk about meal planning, grocery shopping, cooking tips, all of that good stuff.
Awesome. So stay tuned for part 3 of our deep dive into optimal diets. We'll be right back after a short break.
See you soon.
All right, welcome back to our deep dive into optimal diets. So we've talked about the principles, we've talked about the foods. Now let's get down to brass tacks. How do we actually make this all work in real life?
Yeah, that's the big challenge, right?
It is. Because, I don't know about you, but my life is pretty hectic. So I'm always looking for those practical tips and tricks that can make healthy eating a little bit easier.
I hear you. And our expert actually offers some really great advice in this area. So first and foremost, they emphasize the importance of meal planning.
Okay, so planning ahead.
Exactly. Taking some time each week to, plan out your meals and snacks. This can help you avoid those last-minute unhealthy choices when you're, tired and hungry.
Right, because when you're starving, you're just going to grab whatever's easiest, even if it's not the healthiest option.
Exactly. So meal planning can really help you stay on track. And it doesn't have to be super complicated.
Yeah.
You can start by just planning out 1 or 2 meals a day.
Okay, that's manageable.
Yeah. And then gradually, as you get more comfortable, you can plan out more meals. And there are so many online resources and apps that can help with meal planning.
But right, I've seen some of those. They look pretty cool.
Yeah, they can be really helpful. Okay, so meal planning, check. Next up, grocery shopping.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one for me. It's I go in with good intentions, but then I come out with a cart full of junk food.
I know, the grocery store can be a real danger zone.
It is. So how do we navigate that?
Well, our expert recommends making a list and sticking to it, and also shopping the perimeter of the store first.
Okay, why the perimeter?
Because that's typically where you'll find the fresh produce, the meats, the dairy products, all those whole unprocessed foods.
Right.
The inner aisles are, where the processed foods and the sugary drinks and all that stuff is. So
it's a strategic approach to grocery shopping.
exactly. And it can really help you avoid those temptations. And also, don't be afraid to try new things, experiment with different fruits and vegetables, different grains.
I like that.
Try different spices. You might discover some new favorites.
It's all about expanding our palates and not being stuck in a rut.
Exactly. Okay, so we've talked about meal planning, grocery shopping. Now let's talk about cooking.
Okay, yeah, because a lot of people say they don't have time to cook.
Right. Time is a big constraint for a
Yeah.
lot of people.
It is. So what are some time-saving tips?
Well, one thing our expert suggests is batch cooking.
Batch cooking.
Yeah, so cooking, a large batch of something on the weekend
Okay.
and then having leftovers throughout the week. This can save you a lot of time and energy during those busy weeknights.
Well, I like that. That's a good idea.
It is. And you can also, use your slow cooker. That's a great way to cook healthy meals without having to, stand over the stove all day.
Oh, yeah. The slow cooker is a lifesaver.
It really is. And another tip, don't be afraid to keep it simple. You don't have to be a gourmet chef to cook healthy meals. There are plenty of like simple and delicious recipes out there that use just a few ingredients.
Right, because sometimes I think people get intimidated by like those complicated recipes.
Yeah, that can be overwhelming for sure.
So keeping it simple, that's key.
Exactly. Okay, so we've talked about meal planning, grocery shopping, cooking. Now, what about eating out?
Oh yeah, that's a tough one. Because, it's so easy to like overindulge when you're eating out.
It is, especially when you're presented with like all those tempting options.
It's true.
Yeah.
So what are some strategies for navigating restaurant menus?
Well, our expert recommends, looking for dishes that are grilled, baked, or steamed, and asking for your food to be prepared without added oil or butter.
Okay, so being mindful of like how the food is prepared.
Exactly. And also paying attention to portion sizes. Restaurant portions tend to be really large.
Oh yeah, they're huge.
So you might consider splitting a dish with a friend or, taking half of it home for leftovers.
Okay, that's smart. And what about like those sneaky appetizers?
Yeah, appetizers can be a real calorie bomb.
They can. So what do we do about that?
Well, one strategy is to just skip the appetizers altogether, focus on your main meal.
Hmm.
Or if you really want an appetizer, choose something that's lighter and healthier, like a salad or a vegetable soup.
Okay, good tips. Now, we've been talking a lot about like the practical side of things, but I think it's also important to address the mental and emotional aspects of healthy eating.
Absolutely. Because, it's not just about what we're eating, but also like how we're feeling about food in our bodies.
Right. And, a lot of people struggle with like negative thoughts and beliefs about food. So
Mhm.
what does our expert have to say about like cultivating a more positive relationship with food?
Well, they really emphasize the importance of self-compassion and mindfulness.
Okay.
It's about, treating yourself with kindness and understanding and recognizing that no one is perfect.
Yeah, we're all going to like slip up sometimes.
Exactly. And it's not about being like restrictive or punishing yourself for those slip-ups. It's about, acknowledging them, learning from them, and then moving on. Okay.
So we've talked about meal planning, grocery shopping, cooking. Now what about eating out?
Oh, eating out. Yeah, that's a tough one.
It is because it's so easy to like overindulge when you're eating out.
Yeah, you're surrounded by all those temptations.
Exactly. So what are some like strategies for navigating restaurant menus? Like what should we be looking for?
Well, one thing our expert recommends is looking for those dishes that are grilled or baked or steamed
Uh,
and asking for your food to be, prepared without added oil or butter.
right. So being mindful of like how the food is prepared.
Exactly. And also paying attention to portion sizes.
Oh yeah, because restaurant portions are like notoriously huge.
They're massive.
They are. So what can we do about that?
Well, one option is to split a dish with a friend or, take half of it home for leftovers.
That's a good idea.
And then, appetizers. Appetizers can be
Yeah.
a real calorie bomb.
They could be sneaky.
They can. So one strategy is to just skip them altogether. Just focus on your main meal. Or if you really want an appetizer, choose something that's lighter, like a salad or a vegetable soup.
Okay. Those are some really good tips. We've been talking a lot about like the practical side of things, but I think it's also important to address like the mental and emotional aspects of healthy eating.
Oh, absolutely. Because it's not just about what we're eating, but also about how we're feeling about food,
Right.
about our bodies.
Exactly. And so many people struggle with negative thoughts and beliefs about food and their bodies. So what does our expert have to say about like cultivating a more positive relationship with food?
Well, they really emphasize the importance of self-compassion
Okay.
and mindfulness.
Yeah, okay.
It's about treating yourself with kindness and understanding
Yeah.
and recognizing that no one is perfect.
We're all going to slip up sometimes.
Exactly. And it's not about, being restrictive or punishing yourself for those slip-ups. It's about acknowledging them, learning from them, and then, moving on.
I think that's such an important point.
Yeah.
Because so often we get caught up in this all or nothing mentality. Like
Yeah.
if we slip up once, then we've ruined everything.
Oh, yeah, the diet starts money mentality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that's just not realistic.
It's not, and it's not sustainable either.
Right. And it can actually be like really harmful to our mental health.
Absolutely.
So what are some ways that we can, practice self-compassion and mindfulness when it comes to food? Like what does that actually look like in practice.
Well, one thing you can do is to start paying attention to your self-talk, you know?
Okay.
Like what are those thoughts that are running through your head when you make a flip choice that you're, maybe not so happy with?
Yeah, because sometimes those thoughts can be pretty harsh.
They can be brutal. So if you find yourself, thinking things like, "Oh, I'm so bad for eating that," or "I have no willpower," try to reframe those thoughts with more, kind and understanding language.
Okay, so like instead of beating ourselves up, we try to talk to ourselves the way we would talk to a friend.
Exactly. And another thing you can do is to start paying more attention to your body's signals of hunger and fullness. Eating when you're truly hungry and stopping when you're comfortably satisfied.
Right, because we talked about that earlier. It's about like really tuning into those cues.
It is, and it can take some practice, especially if we've been ignoring those cues for a long time.
Right. We've gotten so used to like eating out of habit or boredom or, emotional reasons.
Exactly. So it's really about coming back to our bodies and relearning how to listen to those signals.
And it's a process, right? It's
Yeah.
not something that happens overnight.
It's not, but the more we practice, the easier it becomes.
As we're talking about this, it's making me realize just how much our mindset and our beliefs about food can really impact our overall health and well-being. It's not just about the physical stuff.
It's not. It's really about out the whole picture. It's about nourishing our minds and our bodies and our souls.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes this holistic approach to eating so powerful, because it's not just about, following a set of rules or restricting ourselves.
Yeah, it's about creating a healthy and sustainable relationship with food.
Right. A relationship that feels good and that supports our overall well-being.
Absolutely. And, it's a journey. It's not a destination.
It is. And we're all on that journey together.
We are.
Okay, so before we wrap up this incredible deep dive, let's recap those key takeaways for our listener.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, remember there's no one-size-fits-all perfect diet. But there are these shared principles that can guide us, those 6 pillars and 16 elements we talked about.
And it's not just about what's on your plate. It's about embracing that holistic lifestyle that nourishes your mind, your body, and your spirit.
Pay attention to your body signals, connect with your food culture, minimize those processed foods, prioritize sleep and stress management, and move your body in ways that bring you joy.
It's about making choices that align with your values and support your overall well-being. Now, I know you love to end these deep dives with a thought-provoking question, so what have you got for our listeners today?
Okay, here's one to ponder. If we truly embrace this holistic approach to health, what areas of your life might need a little more attention or nurturing? Perhaps it's your sleep or your stress levels or the quality of your relationships. It's really about, taking an honest look at your life and identifying those areas where you could make some positive shifts.
That's a great question.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that our health is a continuous journey. It's not a destination.
Right.
And every day we have this opportunity to make choices that truly support our well-being.
This has been such an insightful conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
It's been my pleasure.
And a huge thank you to you, our listener, for sharing your research and inspiring this incredible deep dive. We're excited to continue exploring with you in the future.
Absolutely. Until then, keep exploring, keep experimenting, and most importantly, keep listening to your body. It's the wisest guide you have.
Until next time, happy eating. As we wrap up our deep dive into optimal diets, it's striking me that there's so much more to this than just like the food we put on our plates.
It really is a bigger picture kind of thing, isn't it?
It is, and you actually brought up a really good point in your research.
Yeah.
You specifically asked about like all those additives and artificial ingredients in food.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And guess what? Our expert actually dives into that too.
Really? That's awesome.
I know. So what does the expert say about all those like sneaky additives?
Well, they basically recommend minimizing them as much as possible. It kind of goes back to that whole idea of eating more like our ancestors did, focusing on, those whole natural foods.
It's funny you say that because I used to think that stuff was like no big deal. But lately I've been paying more attention to ingredient lists. And it's kind of shocking how many things I'm like, I don't even know what this is.
Right. It's a whole world of like unpronounceable chemicals.
It really is.
And honestly, we're still learning so much about how those things affect our long-term health.
Yeah, it definitely makes you think twice about like all those convenience foods.
Oh, for sure. So is there anything else from the experts' analysis that we haven't touched on yet?
Well, this one's kind of interesting. They talk about how an optimal meal should actually lead to like a gradual increase in fullness as you eat.
Hmm. That's an interesting way to think about it.
I know, right? I've never really considered it like that before.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to, respecting your body's natural satiety cues.
Right.
Instead of feeling like totally stuffed and sluggish after a meal, you should
Mhm.
feel, comfortably satisfied.
So it's about slowing down, savoring each bite, and like really paying attention to how our bodies are responding to the food.
Yeah, exactly. It's the opposite of those meals where you're like, "Oh, I ate way too much."
Yeah.
An optimal meal should leave you feeling nourished and energized.
This whole deep dive has been so eye-opening. I feel like I have a completely new framework for thinking about food and nutrition.
I'm glad to hear that. And it's not about, following a rigid set of rules or anything.
Wait.
It's about, using these insights as a guide to create a dietary pattern that works best for you.
And it's amazing to me how all of this connects back to the simple wisdom of, our ancestors, like your grandfather who just instinctively knew like which foods really nourished him.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
It is. There's so much we can learn from those who came before us.
I agree. And by, blending that ancestral wisdom with modern scientific understanding, I think we can really create a truly optimal approach to eating.
Well, on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up this incredible deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been my pleasure as always.
And a huge thank you to you, our listener, for sharing your research and inspiring this insightful conversation.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
We're excited to continue exploring with you in the future.
Absolutely. Until then, keep exploring, keep experimenting, and most importantly, keep listening to your body. It's the wisest guide you have.
Until next time, happy eating.